So what does communication look like? Here are 3 different models. We're going to break down these models and give you an image for each one. The first is communication as action. And that's another word for that is message transfer. Communication as interaction is the next. Another word for that is message exchange. Communication as transaction is like message creation. So remember the big ideas here. Communication is action, interaction, and transaction. So the first one is action or message transfer. And this is an older model, right? This is an older way we used to think about communication. And it starts from a source to a receiver, and that's it. The next is communication as interaction and messaging exchange. So instead of having just from source to receiver and that's it, you now have the introduction of this concept of it's not just source receiver, it's receiver back to source. So you can imagine a packet of information being sent from the source to the receiver and then back, and then that's it. The key to understanding interaction is its simplicity. And of course, we have human communication as transaction, or message creation. And this is simultaneous. It's not just message sent, message received, stop, as with our first model. Our message sent, message received, message sent, message received, and then stop, as with our second model. Here, messages are being passed between the source and the receiver simultaneously. And that's the big difference. It's simultaneous. It's always happening. And think about how you communicate face-to-face. If this were a face-to-face conversation, you would have the verbal and the nonverbal, right? I would be seeing the nonverbal and you would be listening to the verbal and the nonverbal simultaneously. If you were to nod your head, it might indicate that I should move on to the next part of this discussion, right? If you were to raise your hand, that would indicate that I maybe needed to clarify something. And of course, communication as transaction is all about that simultaneous nature of communication. Mediated communication can include all sorts of different dimensions. And your book does a great job of discussing 4 dimensions. So we have anonymity, personal appearance, distance, and time. And time can be asynchronous or synchronous. Synchronous means at the same time, asynchronous means not at the same time. So tools like email would be a great example of asynchronous. A tool like a live interactive chat would be a synchronous tool. So whether you're using Facebook, Google+, MySpace, whatever dimension of computer communication you're using, not just social networking tools. These are dimensions that we can look at. So the first one, back to the first one, now that we talked about time, is anonymity. Anonymity in the sense that we don't have the same sense of responsibility to our online personas as we would to our personal face-to-face personas. There's a degree of anonymity there. And that degree of anonymity also includes whenever you're representing yourself. That underlying dimension of not actually being there because you're online. The next is personal appearance, and of course personal appearance is far more important in face-to-face interactions than in online interactions. And that's not to negate the importance of personal appearance in online interactions. I'm sure you've all heard the stories of people getting fired based on their social networking accounts. So personal appearance is important in both spaces, but it's far more important in those face-to-face conversations because there's just way more information being transmitted. The next is distance, and of course, technology allows us to communicate over vast distances, and it helps to close those distances and make those distances less of an obstacle to communication. And we've already discussed time. So here are communication characteristics. Communication is inescapable. You cannot not communicate. There's no way to escape it. Just walking into a room where there is at least one other individual means you're communicating. Not necessarily verbally, but possibly non-verbally. It's irreversible. Once you say something, it cannot be unsaid. And you can temper that with, well, I didn't mean to say that, and I'm so sorry I said that, or I can't believe I said that, I was just kidding, or hey, just kidding. It can be complicated. As you can imagine, there are all sorts of complexities that happen whenever human beings try to create and share meanings. And that sense-making process can get real messy and real complicated. It's content and relationship oriented. What that means is content in the sense of the verbal realm, relationship in the sense of the nonverbal realm. One is focused on what is said, the other one's focused on how it's said. So when we talk about verbal communication, we're going to focus on content. When we talk about nonverbal communication, we're going to focus on the relationship. Because it turns out both dimensions are very, very important. Of course, it's governed by rules. There are rules that we learn by watching other people communicate. We learn those rules as we grow up. We learn those from our very first daycare or kindergarten experience, and we modify our understanding of those rules as we encounter other human beings in life. These 5 communication principles are going to guide us through this semester. They really are wonderful things to keep in mind regardless of where you are or who you're communicating with. So the first one there is be aware of your communication. The second one is effectively use and interpret verbal messages. The third is effectively use and interpret nonverbal messages. The fourth is listen and respond thoughtfully to others. And the fifth is appropriately adapt your message to others. All 5 principles will be applied to the interpersonal context, the small group context, and the presentational speaking context. Each of these principles are things that are very, very important to focus on for more effective living. One of the most famous communication theorists, Kenneth Burke, argued that communication is equipment for living. And I can't imagine a better toolbox than these 5 principles to better equip you for a better life.